My name is Nora Blackwood, and at 34, I felt like a character in a poorly written family drama. The kind where everyone knows their roles except for the protagonist, who's always a step behind. That was me, Nora, the perpetually less than Blackwood. Aunt Eleanor's death had thrown the family into its usual chaotic spin. Except this time, instead of distant whispers and subtle digs, the insults were served with a side of blatant greed. Charles, all polished shoes and condescending smiles, practically vibrated with smugness as the will was read. Victoria, ever the echo of her brother, simpered behind him, her eyes glittering with anticipation. The sprawling Blackwood estate, painstakingly built by generations of Blackwoods, excluding my branch, apparently, was divided between them. Charles got the lion's share, the main house, the vineyards, the antique car collection. Victoria received a hefty trust fund and the seaside villa in Tuscany. And me. I inherited a porcelain shepherdess. A dusty, chipped, utterly useless porcelain shepherdess. I watched, stone-faced, as Charles clapped me on the back, a gesture so forced it nearly dislocated my shoulder. Nora, darling, he boomed, Eleanor always did have a quirky sense of humor. At least you'll have something to remember her by. Victoria tittered, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. Yes, Nora, she chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy, a lovely little knick-knack to remind you of your humble origins. Humble. That's what they called it. My father's side of the family had always been considered the humble branch, the one that didn't quite measure up to the Blackwood standard. It was a subtle, insidious form of belittlement that had followed me my entire life. The unspoken implication was always there. I wasn't quite good enough. Not clever enough, not rich enough, not Blackwood enough. I accepted the shepherdess, its cold ceramic surface oddly comforting in my hand. I knew they saw it as a final, definitive statement. A testament to my insignificance. They couldn't have been more wrong. The shepherdess sat on my kitchen counter, a silent observer in my small, rented apartment. It looked ludicrous amidst my mismatched furniture and second-hand appliances. A relic of a life I wasn't supposed to have. A life that had been stolen from me, bit by bit, by Charles and Victoria's family. 4 years, I'd endured their patronizing remarks, their thinly veiled contempt. At family gatherings, I was always relegated to the sidelines, listening to their boasts about business deals and exotic vacations, feeling like an outsider looking in. They spoke of Blackwood blood, as if it was some sort of magical elixir, a secret ingredient that guaranteed success and happiness. And because my father had chosen a different path, a path less paved with gold, I was deemed lacking. My father, God rest his soul, had always been a dreamer. He was a talented artist, content with his small studio and his paintbrushes. He never craved the Blackwood wealth, or so he said. But I remember the flicker of sadness in his eyes when Charles' father, Uncle Richard, would visit, flaunting his expensive cars and tailored suits. My father tried to shield me from the family's judgment, but it was impossible. The whispers followed me like a shadow. Such a shame, they'd murmur, Nora has her father's artistic temperament. So impractical. Impractical, in Blackwood speak, meant destined for failure. The shepherdess, however, was anything but impractical. It was the key. The weapon. The means to finally level the playing field. I ran a finger over the chipped paint, a smile playing on my lips. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was nothing more than the poor, pathetic Blackwood cousin. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game was about to change, and I was holding all the cards. Or, rather, the deeds hidden within a dusty shepherdess. The discovery had been accidental, almost comical. I'd been dusting the shepherdess, something I rarely did, when I noticed a slight imperfection on the base. A hairline crack that ran almost imperceptibly around its circumference. Curiosity, a trait the Blackwoods often underestimated in me, got the better of me. I twisted the base, half expecting it to crumble. Instead, with a soft click, it unscrewed. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, were documents. Not just any documents. Deeds. Deeds to a vast tract of land in West Texas, land that my aunt had secretly purchased decades ago. Land brimming with oil. My heart pounded in my chest. I carefully unfolded the brittle papers, my hands trembling. The names on the deeds were unmistakable, Nora Blackwood, my aunt. And the location, it matched the stories my father used to tell me, stories I'd dismissed as childhood fantasies. Stories about land that had been rightfully his, land that had been stolen. I remembered my father's hushed tones, his bitterness when he spoke of Uncle Richard. He cheated me, Nora, he'd said, his voice thick with resentment. He used forged documents to claim what was rightfully mine. I'd been too young to understand the full implications, but I remembered the pain in his eyes. Now, holding these deeds in my hands, the truth was undeniable. My aunt, bless her shrewd soul, had known all along. She had secretly righted the wrong, securing the land and hiding the proof until the right moment. Or, perhaps, until the right person came along to uncover it. The shepherdess wasn't just a worthless trinket. It was a time capsule, a treasure chest, a loaded weapon. It was the key to unlocking a truth that had been buried for far too long. And it was about to explode in Charles and Victoria's faces. The stolen land. It wasn't just about the money, although the oil beneath its surface was worth a fortune. It was about the principle. It was about the years of humiliation, the unspoken judgment, the feeling of being less than. It was about my father's broken dreams and the quiet resignation that had settled in his eyes as he watched his brother prosper on ill-gotten gains. Uncle Richard had been a force of nature, a whirlwind of ambition and ruthless determination. He'd built his empire on a foundation of lies and deceit, and he hadn't hesitated to crush anyone who stood in his way, including his own brother. My father, with his gentle soul and his artistic sensibilities, had been no match for Richard's cunning. The forgery, according to family whispers that had reached my young ears, had been expertly done. A signature subtly altered, a document conveniently misplaced, a witness conveniently absent. It was a clean sweep, leaving my father with nothing but a sense of betrayal and a lingering resentment. He'd tried to fight it, of course. He'd consulted lawyers, gathered evidence, but Richard had been too powerful, too well connected. Eventually, my father had given up, retreating into his art and trying to forget the injustice. But I never forgot. And neither, it seemed, did Aunt Eleanor. Now, holding the deeds in my hand, I felt a surge of righteous anger. Not just for myself, but for my father, for the years of suffering he had endured. It was time to set things right. It was time to expose the truth and bring Charles and Victoria crashing down from their gilded perch. The wedding. It was the perfect stage. A celebration of their wealth and privilege, a showcase of their perfect lives. And it was about to become their undoing. I would give them a gift they would never forget. A gift wrapped in porcelain and tied with the ribbon of truth. A gift that would shatter their world. My plan began to take shape with a cold, calculating precision. It wasn't just about exposing Charles and Victoria. It was about dismantling the entire edifice of their arrogance and privilege. It was about revealing the rotten core that lay beneath their carefully constructed facade. First, I needed proof. Beyond the deeds, I needed something more concrete, something that would leave no room for doubt. I spent weeks poring over old documents, searching for any trace of the forgery. I haunted the local archives, sifting through dusty records, my eyes burning with fatigue. Then, I found it. A small, almost insignificant detail in an old land registry document. A discrepancy in the signature on a transfer deed. It was subtle, but undeniable. A slight slant, a barely perceptible difference in the way the R was formed. It was enough. Armed with this new evidence, I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. I explained my story, showed her the deeds, and presented her with the forged document. She listened intently, her expression impassive. "This is a serious accusation, Ms. Blackwood," she said, her voice measured. "Forgery is a criminal offense." "I know," I replied, my voice firm. "And I intend to prove it." Ms. Davies agreed to take my case. She was confident that with the evidence I had gathered, we could build a solid case against Charles and Victoria. But I wasn't interested in a lengthy legal battle. I wanted something more immediate, more impactful. I wanted to expose them publicly, to strip them of their wealth and their reputation. That's when I came up with the idea of the microphone. A tiny, discreet device that would capture Victoria's inevitable boasting and broadcast it to the world. It was risky, but it was the only way to ensure that the truth would be heard. And it all hinged on the porcelain shepherdess. It was the perfect Trojan horse, concealing my plan in plain sight. Securing the microphone was trickier than I anticipated. I couldn't exactly stroll into an electronics store and ask for a device capable of discreetly recording and broadcasting audio. I needed something small, powerful, and undetectable. I turned to an old friend from college, David, a tech whiz with a penchant for gadgets and a healthy dose of skepticism towards the Blackwoods. I'd confided in him about the stolen land and my plan for revenge. He'd listened patiently, his eyes widening with each revelation. "So, you want to bug a porcelain shepherdess?" he'd asked, a grin spreading across his face. "I'm in." David worked his magic, crafting a miniature microphone and transmitter that could be seamlessly hidden within the shepherdess's base. He even rigged it to a live streaming platform, ensuring that Victoria's confession would be broadcast to a select audience, investors, business partners, and a few carefully chosen members of the media. "This is some serious spy stuff, Nora," David said, handing me the modified shepherdess. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "More than anything," I replied, my voice resolute. The wedding was tomorrow. The invitations had been extravagant, printed on thick, embossed paper. The venue was a sprawling estate in the countryside, complete with manicured gardens and a champagne fountain. It was the epitome of Blackwood excess. I spent the evening rehearsing my role, practicing my meek smile, and my self-deprecating remarks. I had to convince Charles and Victoria that I was still the same old Nora, the harmless, insignificant cousin they could easily dismiss. As I drifted off to sleep, I clutched a photograph of my father. His eyes, full of kindness and integrity, seemed to gaze back at me with approval. "I won't let you down, Dad," I whispered. "Tomorrow, we get our revenge." The shepherdess sat silently on my nightstand, its secrets waiting to be unleashed. The countdown had begun. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the storm brewing inside me. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple, understated dress that wouldn't draw attention. I wanted to blend in, to be a ghost in their opulent celebration, silently waiting for the opportune moment. As I drove to the estate, I checked the shepherdess one last time, ensuring that the microphone was securely in place and the live stream was active. David had sent me a text message. "Good luck, Nora. Remember, silence is golden, but schadenfreude is platinum." The estate was even more extravagant than I had imagined. Guests milled about, sipping champagne and admiring the meticulously arranged floral displays. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of polite chatter. I spotted Charles almost immediately. He was holding court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by a gaggle of fawning admirers. He looked every inch the successful businessman, his tailored suit impeccably pressed, his smile radiating confidence. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. I assumed she was sequestered in a bridal suite, preparing for her grand entrance. I decided to bide my time, to observe and wait for the right moment to strike. I circulated through the crowd, offering polite greetings and accepting the occasional pitying glance. I could feel their judgment, their silent assessment of my worth. They saw me as the poor relation, the one who didn't belong. But I knew something they didn't. I held the key to their downfall. And I was about to unleash it. I just needed Victoria to take the bait. To succumb to her arrogance and reveal the truth. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that she wouldn't be able to resist. The shepherdess was too tempting a prize. A symbol of their victory, a testament to their superiority. And it was about to become their ruin. Finally, Victoria made her entrance. She glided down the aisle, a vision in white lace and diamonds, her face radiant with happiness. Or, perhaps, with something else. Triumph. Contempt. It was hard to tell. As she reached the altar, she caught my eye and offered a brief, almost imperceptible smirk. It was all the confirmation I needed. She knew. She knew about the shepherdess, and she knew what it represented. She believed she had won. The ceremony was a blur of vows and readings and carefully orchestrated emotions. I barely paid attention, my mind focused on the task ahead. The gift exchange. That was the moment of truth. After the ceremony, the guests gathered in the reception hall, a cavernous space adorned with crystal chandeliers and towering floral arrangements. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. The gift table was a mountain of exquisitely wrapped packages. I placed the shepherdess carefully on top, its chipped paint and dusty surface a stark contrast to the surrounding opulence. Charles approached me, his smile condescending. "Nora, darling," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "How thoughtful of you to bring a gift. Though, I must say, it's rather rustic." "It's a family heirloom," I replied, my voice deceptively meek. "It belonged to Aunt Eleanor." "Ah, yes," Charles said, his eyes glazing over. "Eleanor always did have a fondness for oddities." He chuckled, and I could see Victoria smirking behind him. The moment had arrived. The gift exchange was about to begin. The cameras were flashing, the guests were cheering, and Victoria was about to step into my trap. The shepherdess was ready. The microphone was live. It was time to let the truth be heard. The game was on. Victoria and Charles sat at a long, elaborately decorated table, surrounded by their wedding party. As the gift exchange commenced, Victoria, with a practiced flourish, began unwrapping the presents. Each item was greeted with a chorus of oohs and ahs: expensive jewelry, designer handbags, a crystal vase that probably cost more than my annual rent. Finally, she reached the shepherdess. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she recognized it. A flicker of amusement played across her lips. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands, examining it with a mock curiosity that was almost comical. "Oh, Nora," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How unique." "It's a family heirloom," I repeated, maintaining my meek facade. "I thought you might appreciate it." "Appreciate it?" Victoria laughed, a high-pitched, brittle sound that echoed through the hall. "Darling, I haven't appreciated anything this quaint since I was playing dress-up in my grandmother's attic." Charles joined in the laughter, his eyes crinkling with amusement. They were playing their parts perfectly, the wealthy, sophisticated couple mocking the poor, insignificant cousin. But I knew that beneath their laughter, there was a hint of unease. They knew that the shepherdess represented something more than just a dusty old knick-knack. It represented the truth, the stolen land, the years of deceit. Victoria turned to Charles, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You know, darling," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think this little shepherdess would look perfect in the garden. Right next to the gnome collection." The guests erupted in laughter again, and I felt a surge of anger. But I held my tongue, maintaining my composure. I knew that the moment of truth was approaching. "Perhaps," I said, my voice barely audible above the laughter, "you could tell me more about the land where you plan to put it." Victoria paused, her smile faltering slightly. "The land?" she asked, her voice suddenly guarded. "What do you mean?" "The land in West Texas," I replied, my voice still soft, but now laced with a subtle challenge. "The land that my father used to own." The laughter died down. A hush fell over the hall. All eyes were on Victoria, waiting for her response. The microphone was live. The world was listening. It was time for her to confess. Victoria's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. But there was none. All eyes were on her, waiting for her to explain. To deny. To lie. Charles stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her arm. "Nora, I think you've had a bit too much champagne," he said, his voice strained. "Victoria has no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, but I think she does, Charles," I replied, my voice now steady and unwavering. "Don't you, Victoria? Don't you know about the land that your father stole from my father? The land that's now worth millions?" Victoria's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I pressed on, my voice gaining strength. "Don't you know about the forged documents? The altered signatures? The lies that your family has been perpetuating for years?" The silence in the hall was deafening. Even the wedding photographer had stopped snapping pictures. Everyone was listening, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Finally, Victoria found her voice. "Nora, you're being ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling. "This is my wedding day. Please don't ruin it with your fantasies." "Fantasies?" I scoffed. "These are not fantasies, Victoria. These are facts. And I have proof." I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the forged document, the discrepancy in the signature clearly visible. I held it up for everyone to see. "This," I said, my voice ringing with conviction, "is the document that your father used to steal my father's land. And this," I gestured to the shepherdess, "is the key to unlocking the truth." I paused, allowing my words to sink in. Then, I looked directly at Victoria, my eyes filled with righteous anger. "So, Victoria," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Are you going to deny it? Are you going to lie to everyone here? Or are you finally going to tell the truth?" The room held its breath, waiting for her answer. The live stream was broadcasting. The world was watching. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The pressure was too much. The weight of the lies, the years of deception, the fear of exposure, it all became too much for Victoria to bear. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Fine," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Fine, it's true. What does it matter anyway? It was years ago. And it's not like your father was ever going to do anything with that land. He was just a dreamer, a loser." Charles gasped, his face a mask of horror. He tried to interrupt her, to silence her, but it was too late. The floodgates had opened and Victoria couldn't stop herself. "We needed that land," she continued, her voice rising in pitch. "Our family needed it. Your father was too weak to fight for it, so we took it. And we made something of it. We built an empire. She paused, taking a ragged breath, her eyes blazing with defiance. So what if we used forged documents? So what if we lied? We did what we had to do to survive. And now we're rich. And you're still nothing. Her words hung in the air, raw and ugly and undeniable. The guests stared at her in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. The live stream continued to broadcast, capturing every word, every gasp, every horrified expression. Victoria finally seemed to realize what she had done. Her eyes widened in horror, and she clapped a hand over her mouth, as if trying to recapture the words she had just uttered. But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth was out. And Charles and Victoria's world was about to come crashing down around them. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Justice, after years of waiting, had finally arrived. The empire, built on sand, was about to be swept away. The world was listening to Victoria's confession. I had won. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Investors pulled out of Charles's ventures, banks called in loans, and business partners severed ties. The empire that Uncle Richard had built on lies began to crumble, brick by agonizing brick. The live stream went viral, trending on social media, and dominating news headlines. The Blackwood name, once synonymous with wealth and success, became a byword for deceit and corruption. Charles tried to salvage the situation, issuing a series of carefully worded statements denying any knowledge of the forgery, and blaming his late father for the entire scheme. But no one believed him. Victoria's confession had been too damning, too raw, too real. The authorities launched an investigation, and it quickly became clear that Charles was deeply implicated in the fraud. He was charged with multiple counts of forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. Victoria, ostracized by her family and friends, retreated into seclusion, her wedding day dreams shattered beyond repair. Her reputation was ruined, her social standing irrevocably tarnished. The wedding venue, once a symbol of their opulent lifestyle, became a crime scene, swarming with investigators and reporters. The champagne fountain, once flowing with celebration, stood silent and empty. The floral arrangements, once so meticulously arranged, began to wilt and decay. The Blackwood name was mud. Their carefully constructed world had collapsed, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. The empire, built on sand, had finally been washed away by the tide of truth. And it all started with a dusty porcelain shepherdess. The shepherdess, which they mocked, was the reason for their downfall. They were so busy laughing at what they thought was worthless, that they didn't realize it held the truth that destroyed them. They underestimated me, and they paid the price. The price for their greed. The price for their lies. The price for stealing my father's dreams. With Charles facing criminal charges and Victoria in disgrace, the legal battle for the land began. Ms. Davies, armed with the deeds, the forged document, and Victoria's damning confession, presented an airtight case. It was a swift and decisive victory. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me full ownership of the oil-rich land in West Texas. The land was more than just a source of wealth. It was a symbol of my family's resilience, a testament to my father's integrity, and a vindication of my aunt's faith in me. It was a tangible representation of justice, finally served after years of waiting. I sold the Blackwood estate. The vineyards, the main house, the antique car collection, all of it. I didn't want any reminders of the family that had treated me so poorly. I used the money to start a foundation in my father's name, supporting young artists and providing them with the resources and opportunities that he had been denied. I moved away from the town where I had spent my entire life, seeking a fresh start, a chance to build a new identity, free from the shadow of the Blackwood name. I kept the shepherdess. It sat on my desk, a constant reminder of the truth, of the power of justice, and of the importance of never underestimating the underdog. Sometimes, I would look at it and smile, remembering Victoria's mocking laughter. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was defeated. They were wrong. I, Nora Blackwood, the poor relation, had brought down an empire with a dusty porcelain shepherdess. And in doing so, I had finally found my own worth. I wasn't the less than Blackwood anymore. I was Nora Blackwood, the woman who had dared to fight for what was right. And that, I realized, was a far greater inheritance than any amount of money could ever buy. The shepherdess, once a symbol of my supposed insignificance, had become a symbol of my triumph.
Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.